vertical growth. You may have a seat in the presence of the Lord. We're all on this journey to find the place where we have purpose and meaning. And this place of finding purpose and meaning is where we can add value, where we can function in our unique advances and contributions. Where we add value and where we find purpose is where we are challenged to do better, where we are challenged to become better, where our capacity is grown, and where we grow deeper in our understanding and knowledge. The purpose and meaning that we all have is given to us by God and is a part of our trajectory of life. Think about Genesis chapter 2. When God designed Adam, he designed him to take care of the earth. He designed Adam to not only do that, but he designed him to have dominion over everything that God created. And he also designed Adam to populate the earth. He was designed with a purpose in mind. Think about Joseph. When he was designed and created, he was the love child of his father and his mother. And after growing at a certain age, Joseph went through some life trials and tribulations. And after going through all of that, we find out he was designed for such a time as this to save Israel, to develop leadership and strategy, and to teach his family about how to forgive. What does it look like to forgive those who have wronged you? What does it look like to serve people who have mistreated you? And what does it look like to do what's right by God, even though you feel like you don't have to do it or you don't want to do it? Think about David. He was designed in purpose. He was designed to be a king and a mighty warrior. He was designed as a man after God's own heart. He made mistakes. He sinned. He failed. He drifted to the left and to the right. And yet God still designed him for a purpose that he fulfilled for God's glory. Jesus was designed to save this world from its sins. Jesus was designed for purpose. Jesus was designed to release us from the bondage of sin. So finding a purpose and meaning allows you to contribute at your maximum capacity to your community and to your family. And this serves as your ultimate purpose. Your ability to give back, your ability to help people navigate their problems is a part of what we're called to do. We are called to be so good at what we do that we become the go-to person when it comes to solving problems of other people. Think about this. When your car breaks down, do you go to the doctor? When your car breaks down, do you go to the dentist? When your car breaks down, do you go to the person who is an artist? No, you go to a person who knows how to fix cars. They call that a mechanic. The purpose of having a profession, the purpose of having destiny, the purpose of having a purpose is so that people, when they have a problem that needs to be fixed or resolved, they go to you. This is why we're created. We're created to serve and to live in community. And when we don't find our purpose, we find ourselves giving less and less to our community. When we don't find our purpose, we find ourselves feeling out of place, feeling like we don't belong, feeling like we have nothing to contribute, feeling like there is no reason for us to be here. And that could be further from the truth. You're designed to serve and to live in community. You have to find that purpose so that you can give to that community, so that you can serve in that community, so that you can live in purpose. So the question you got to be asking yourself is, what makes it hard to find purpose? But number one, oftentimes what makes it hard to find purpose is the fact that we're comparing ourselves to people. We look at what other people are doing. We look at what they have. We look at their success, and we feel like what they have should be in our possession. The truth is, what other people have belongs to them. What other people have belongs to them. What other people have absolutely belongs to them. And just because it belongs to them does not mean it's attainable by us. We don't know what other people had to go through to get what we see. We don't know what they had to suffer, what they had to let go, what they had to sacrifice in order to get what we see. But we only see what's on the surface. What other people have belongs to them. The second thing that makes it hard to find purpose is we desire skills that are not aligned with who we are. We desire skills that are not aligned with who we are. We look at other people's professions and we say to ourselves, that looks like fun. Or I think I can do that. And in doing that, we miss the historical references of how God has developed us over history, building within us skill set after skill set after skill set. And as I've been telling you guys for weeks, God over our lives has created a theme of things that he has developed within us. Themes and ideas, skill sets and preferences of how to do stuff, how to get stuff done. This is how God functions. This is how God operates. And so when we compare ourselves to other people and we look at what they can do and we say, that looks like fun and I can do that, we are negating the fact that God has gifted us to do something within our own life. You have your own gifts. You have your own abilities. You have your own capacities. And you must tap into those things. You cannot be gifted to teach, but rather play sports. You cannot be gifted to heal people through medicine, but be an engineer. You can't be gifted in the arts, but you try to become a real estate investor. While you can do any and all things, and it's not impossible to do all these things, the reality is you will struggle to operate in purpose if you are not obeying the gift of God within you. It won't feel natural. Remember, we've been learning over the past couple of weeks, God takes us through the bread of adversity and the water of affliction to help us understand our purpose in life. For years when I was a kid, I used to look at other children who could draw. And I remember distinctly in third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade and sixth grade, there was a young man I went to school with, and his entire family were artistically inclined. I mean, they could pick up a pencil and they could just draw. They could have depth of field. They could have 3D images. They could just make things pop off paper in ways that just made me so jealous and so frustrated. And I tried to copy them because it looked cool. It looked like something that I wanted to do. And whatever I tried to do, I could not do it because that's not what I was called to do. Before he was classically trained, he could just do. He could just see. He could make it happen. Lastly, what makes it hard to find your purpose is when we fail to acknowledge what God has been developing us all these years. One of the secrets about finding purpose is realizing that some of the things that comes easy to us are the things we're called to do on a daily basis. I remember having a conversation with my wife one time, and we were talking about purpose and what we're called to do. And when we were younger, we struggled with finding purpose because we felt like if this thing became easy to us, if it was easy for us to do A, B, and C, God could not possibly have called us to do this. And so we fought against the easy things, and we were taught that the hard things, the things that made you cry at night, the things that made you break your brain were the things we were called to do. Years later, we come to find out, no. The things that are super hard to do, the things that don't come natural to us, that's not our calling. Many times people have chosen careers, chosen academic studies, chosen relationships that are just way too hard, ignoring the path that God has outlined already. I'm called to teach. I'm called to lead. Anything outside of that realm is a struggle. Not that I'm not smart, not that I'm not capable, it's just not my calling. When you think about your purpose, when you think about your destiny and the journey God has you on, where are you called to be? Who are you called to be? What are you called to do? So then the next question you got to ask yourself is, what do we do when we find our designated territory? Once you find your designated territory, you are now responsible to assess what you've discovered. I want you to process this with me. Once you find your designated territory, you are now called to assess that territory for deeper understanding. Before I explain this, I want you to know a few things. Number one, the assessment process is required. When you stumble upon where you're called to be, you must assess where you are. And it does not mean you lack faith when you do an assessment. Rather, when you assess the territory God has given you, it's a form of supporting your faith. If God has promised something to you, he's promised a place for you to go to, he's promised a career, a job, a house, a relationship, before you walk in it, you must assess that thing to determine, is this the promise of God? There are things the enemy will present to you to make it look like this belongs to you, that this is what God promised, this is the relationship, this is the job, this is the career, this is the business. The reality is, no, it looks like what God promised, but you must assess the thing to determine if this is what God actually promised. The assessment process builds your faith. It builds your understanding of what God has promised you years ago. And it's used to affirm the will of God in your life. In the earlier part of Numbers chapter 13, Moses, when he was still in leadership, he released 12 men to go spy out the land that God promised their ancestors 400 years earlier. Mind you, Moses was instrumental in the process of releasing the people from bondage from Egypt. He was encouraging in their process to understand that you now can be free. They were in slavery for 400 years, and it took them a while to intellectually process that we are now free. They rode through and walked through the desert for 40 years, even though it could have been done in 40 days to get to the land that promised them. That was promised to them. And now they're at the point where they're about to cross over. Moses sends 12 spies to spy out the land that God promised them. There are 6 categories that Moses wanted them to look at, and I want you to take a deep listen to these 6 categories to figure out, how does this apply to your life? Here's the first thing. He wanted them to assess the people. Are they strong or are they weak? Are they few or are they many? How would you describe them? What are their behavioral traits? How do they function? How do they interact with each other? Are they civil? When it comes to assessing a new territory, you will undoubtedly discover people who already sit in the territory that God has promised you. Whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business opportunity, there are people that are already there. And the first thing Moses says to assess are the people. What are they like? What's the culture that they present? How do they live their life? How do they run the business? How do they do the job? All of this tells a story. Because when you step into this new space, you need to understand what you're dealing with. The first thing is to assess the people. The second thing Moses talks about is to observe the land. Is it pleasant or is it harsh? Is it nice or is it mean? Is the workplace culture conducive to who I am as a person, or do they chew people up and spit them out? Is it a welcoming workplace environment? Is it a place that trains people? Is it a place that welcomes people? Is it a place that is nice to people? Are they mean to people that look like me? Are they mean to certain genders? Are there glass ceilings to people of color or women or age? What's the land like? Here's the third thing Moses says. He said, I want you to describe the towns that they live in. Are they open camps or are they fortified walls? Open camps, meaning, is it free flowing? Can people just walk in and out of a town? Or do you have to pass by a toll booth to get in? Is it guarded by security? Or is it just freely open where anybody with the ability to transport can go from point A to point B? This is vital. Because as we assess the process of acquisition and as we assess the process of taking over the land that God promised us, we need to know what we're getting ready to run ourselves into. Will there be fortified walls in a certain town but open borders in another? It makes a difference. So tell me about the towns. Here's the fourth thing. And what about the soil? Is it fertile or is it barren? Does it produce fruit? Or does it struggle to produce fruit? You know, when you're looking at a job and you want to assess the culture, you want to assess the people, you want to assess the supervisor and all that stuff, the next thing you really got to assess is, what's their financial health? Are they financially successful? Are they on a trajectory financially that shows growth is on the horizon? Because to take a job with a company that isn't growing, or to take a job with a company that doesn't have financial capacity to grow, means that you're taking a job that could be closed next week or next month or next quarter or next year, given the turn of the market. So Moses is saying, is the soil fertile or is it barren? Is the company ran by people who know how to till the ground? Or is the ground hardened because the people who are stewards of the company don't know how to manage it? Here's the next thing Moses says, number 5. Are there forests? Are there natural habitation where you can see trees and flowers growing in the wild, where you can see animals and creatures of all types just existing as God designed it? Vegetation like this indicates naturalness, wholeness, organicness, if that's even a word. It indicates that there's a segment of the land that allows for God's creation to just be, and it is. It's not manufactured, it's not created, it's not tainted by the hand of human beings, but it just exists. In the context of all types of relationships, we all desire to be tied to someone or something, whether it's a person or a family or even a company. But there's also a part of us that desires to have a moment or moments of natural freedom. We don't want to be bogged down with your way of doing stuff all the time. We want this opportunity, this window to just exist and be wild, to be creative, to be innovative. So Moses is saying, are there forests? Are there natural habitation? And then the last thing he says, I want you to try and bring back a sample of the produce that grows there, because this is the season for ripe grapes. If this is the season for ripe grapes, bring me the best that they have, because we can look at what they have and determine if it truly is what God promised, flowing with milk and honey, flowing with abundance, flowing with flavor, flowing with everything that we stand in need of. All of this is evidence of the assessment process. While one could look at the assessment process and say that this is not proof of having faith, the reality is you do not know what lies ahead. Even if God says go forward, you do not know what lies ahead. It behooves you to follow the guidance of Moses to assess what's next. The assessment of what's next builds the faith. But think about this. Of the 6 things, of the 6 categories Moses wanted the men to assess, notice that 1/6, or roughly 17% of the assessment process was about people. Notice, only 17% of what is to be assessed was about people. What makes it difficult for us to move forward and execute our faith is the fact that we focused on people more than anything else. There are too many times where we are discouraged or dissuaded by people as opposed to looking at the big picture, as opposed to determining the value and the benefits of the big picture. We focus on people. This is where the text takes us today and why we're talking about vertical growth. The biggest issue we find in the text in Romans 13, 31, 32, and 33 is the fact that the spies, 10 of the 12 spies, came back and said, this land is not for us. After hearing from God for years, for generations, after having the man of God confirm and affirm the land that belongs to them, the 10 of the 12 spies said, this land is not for us, and we have no capacity to overtake the land. And their chief reason was people. They used 17% of the assessment process to make a judgment of the entire 100% of what God promised. And that argument became effective to the point that that's all people heard. Now, the scripture does say that when the 12 spies came back, they all confirmed, yep, this land flows with milk and honey. It is everything God promised. I mean, it is amazing. It is something that we have been dreaming about. It is something that we know that God has given us, but it's occupied by giants. We feel like grasshoppers, according to the text, and they think the same thing. In our sight and in their sight, we look like grasshoppers. Says who? Says a person that lacks faith. How do you grow vertically? You already know Canaan belongs to you. God has already spoken to you about what Canaan is in your life, marriage, business, job, relationships, finances, health, whatever it is, God has already promised Canaan to you. You already know what it looks like. But then the question is, how do you identify growth areas so that you can establish yourself? Number one, vertical growth areas are places where you must build up from that has a solid foundation. I want to make sure that we leave here on the same page today because it is about the solid foundation. In order to get to this growth area at the top where the H is, you must have a foundation way at the bottom. Too many times we hear God speak and we just want to start absolutely right here. We want to start where the destination is, not realizing to get here you have to start all the way at the bottom. Whatever it is that you're praying for, whatever it is that you desire, there is a beginning point that we have to start with. And we have to build on a solid foundation to get to the top bunk. In order to build vertically, we must have a designated territory to build a foundation. If you're going to build your career, you have to have a foundation in some competency area. What are you good at? Where are you called to be? If you're going to build vertically in a relationship, the relationship has to be founded on something solid. If you're going to build a house and it has to go up vertically, it has to be built on something solid. What is the foundation or the foundations in your life for you to build vertically? A foundation includes a core set of knowledge, a core set of information, a core set of experiences, pre-existing yet expanding capacity, and a desire and a hunger to grow in that area. Just because you find an area that feels good to you doesn't mean you won't be devoid of painful experiences. No. Even in your passion areas, you find pain. Even in your passion areas, you find frustration. Even in your passion areas, you find anger. That's going to be found no matter where you go. The question is, where will I enjoy it the most? Growing vertically requires that. For some, we have to establish a new foundation. Sometimes life hits us hard and we got to start all over again. But here's the beauty about starting all over again. If you got to remove your foundational block and put it in a different area, this block represents everything you've learned in your past life. It represents everything you learned in your previous experience. It represents everything you learned in the previous situation God brought you through. And if you got to pick up your foundational block and put it somewhere else where the ground is more firm and the foundation is more secure, you have a starting step. Starting over doesn't always have to be from zero. Those breads of adversity, the water of affliction we've been through, everything we talk about, is designed to teach you what your starting blocks are and where they are. And perhaps you get to this point and you got to start all over again. You don't got to start all the way down here. You reset the foundation, build the second step, get to the third step, figure out what you missed here, build a foundation here, and build until you keep going up. It's all about vertical growth. Vertical growth is a consequence of finding your purpose. When you find where you're called to be, when you find your purpose, you grow deeper and you grow taller. That is the consequence. This requires us to climb mountains rather, and to dig deep to establish solid foundations. It requires focus. It requires dedication. It requires your full attention. And the challenges we face when it comes to going vertically is being sure that we're called to this. It's being sure that we found the territory God's promised us. We found the career, the relationship, the place we're supposed to be. It's the challenge is being sure that we understand the value of building vertically. A lot of people want to go horizontal because they feel like the wider they go, the better they are. The reality is, no, that's not true. You do not have a ton of information, a ton of knowledge to be all-encompassing. If that was the case, you would be God. We have vertical information that allows us to find a stepping stool so that we can grow in a positive trajectory towards purpose. Not having security in that makes us feel like it's hard to grow vertically. You will have to sacrifice what you perceive to be growth for real growth. You have to build a team to help you. You can't do this by yourself. You need people in your corner to encourage you, to support you, to train you. You need a church family, a pastor to pour into you, to help you give you vision. And you need people who are on the ground who actually understand what you're called to, who can build up the foundation in your life. This is not a solo sport. This is a team sport. We're in this together. It requires you to grow in your knowledge and your education. It doesn't have to be a degree. That's overstated. It has to be education in this area. How much do I need to learn to get here? Who do I need to study under? What do I need to study? What books do I need to read? What lectures do I need to hear? Where can I practice my area of influence? And how can I get better at it? Growth areas matter so much. Your vertical growth matters to your salvation. It matters to who you're called to be. It matters to where you're going. I'll close with this. Remember, there were 6 areas of assessment that Moses gave the spies to look at. 1/6 or 17% of that assessment process included looking at people. It's impossible to move forward in your faith if you're looking at people. If you're busy comparing yourself to people and looking at what they're doing and what they have in comparison to what you don't have, you will always find a reason to quit. There's a reason why God did not tell them about the giants in the land. There's a reason why God doesn't tell you about the people who are where you're getting ready to go. And the reason is, if we knew how hard it was to deal with the people that were already there, many of us would quit before we even get started. We would give up. We would be intimidated before we even had a chance to engage with the people. And that is the fastest way to lose your faith. Let me remind you how this works. God gives a promise and you hold on to it. You prove your belief and your faith in that promise through your action. James chapter 2 teaches us faith without works is dead. As God reveals the pathway forward towards our promise, it is up to us, as Moses did, to assess the land, to understand, is this what God promised? Is it what God said it was? Does it match up with the promise? And if the answer is yes, everything that is wrong now has to go back to God for further evaluation and discussion. God did not tell them 400 years ago or generations before that the land that belongs to you will be occupied by giants. No, he didn't promise that. He didn't say that. That wasn't part of the conversation. He said there's a land that will flow with milk and honey and it belongs to you. There's a job that belongs to you. There's a relationship that belongs to you. There is a destination that belongs to you. It doesn't matter who has it right now. What matters more is that it belongs to you. But what about the person that has it right now? You're losing sight of the way God works. Here's how God works. It is God's job to promote one and take down another. It is God's job to elevate another and de-elevate another. It is God's job to transfer the wealth of the wicked to the righteous. We're so worried about what we can't control that we forget that we have a God who controls everything. God controls the people that are standing in the way. God controls the person who's blocking your job application. God's controlling the person who's blocking your promotion. God's controlling the person who's blocking the business loan you're going after. God's controlling the person who's standing in your way of whatever you're trying to accomplish. Yes, it's frustrating, but you're called to grow vertically. And if you're being blocked by someone, and if someone is standing in the way of you obtaining what God has promised you, this is now your opportunity to go back to God in prayer and say, God, what do we do now? This is not the time to quit. This is not the time to throw in the towel. This is not the time to tell people in your life, well, this is not for me because they're there. No, this is the time to dig in and say, nope, I see the promises of God. It is true. It is confirmed. Now I need God to work this last piece out because he didn't tell me about this. Clearly, this is something he has to do. Because if it was something he wanted me to do, he would have revealed it to me way before then. And I would have had time to plan for it. I would have had time to understand it. I would have time to figure out how to get around it. But that was not the calling. The calling was for the people of God to leave the slavery and to go through the desert and to occupy the land. That's their job. Everything else, all the giants, everything that stood in the way belonged to God. As you leave this place today and as you get ready to go and deal with the rest of your week, there are places you are called to and you're still trying to get there. Perhaps you've identified those places. Perhaps you know exactly where you need to be. Job, education, career, relationship, etc. Perhaps you already know what's meant for you and you see it and it's right on the horizon. Yet you've been intimidated by people, applications, people who are standing in the way of admissions, people who are blocking the promotion. Whatever the case may be, if you see somebody blocking what belongs to you, do not quit. Do not give in. Do not stop. Don't you give up. Don't you stop the process of growing vertically. Take one step at a time. They took one of my steps away. Okay, go back down, build another step, put that back, the other step back in that area it's supposed to be, and keep going. Those giants that are standing in your way, let God handle them. Promotion does not come from the east, nor to the west, nor does it come from the north or the south. It comes from God. Amen. In order to promote, thank you, man. In order to receive your promotion, God will have to take someone else out of the way. Let God do his work. And you focus on your vertical growth. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your precious word.